First, I want to announce that this meeting will be recorded. And I'd like to welcome everybody to our general membership meeting. Jennifer Rachel, I'm your 2018 NOCBOR president. I'd like to welcome all our existing and new members. I'm glad to see how many of them came out, especially for the breakfast and the educational, learning. This is just one of the many benefits of your membership in NOCBOR. It is now larger than it has ever been, with over 5,000 members. At our state level, we have 30,000 members, and at our national level, we are 1.3 million strong, making us the largest professional trade organization in the United States. There is power in unity. I'm glad to be a part of this. Our organization is working on the following at a national level for next year. We're going to be working on the new tax law, which we're going to be talking about and educating ourselves about today. They'll be working on the National Flood Insurance Program, residential real estate finance, dealing with FHA, VA, and rural housing services. Fair housing, which is our 40th anniversary of fair housing in April this year. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac reform, the association health plans, which I'm sure a lot of you will be happy to hear, business operations, commercial lending, Americans with Disability lawsuit reform, anti-money laundering, net neutrality, transportation and infrastructure. We as an organization will be continuing to work towards the goal of electronic lock boxes and offering continuing education to our members. We'll have a busy year. We welcome you here and are honored to have our distinguished guest, Ed Meisner from Oakland County Treasurer. I thank you for being here, and I'd like to introduce Nikki Schuler to give our presentation.
You bow your heads. Lord, we gather here today to learn something and get caught up in all of the great work that our board is doing for us, and we thank you for blessing us with such strong and wise leaders that are leading our board forward and growing it in great numbers. And we thank you for the past blessings of last year, and we just pray that you'll also bless us all in our business as we go forward this year. Thank you for the food provided today, and thank you for a wonderful meeting and a wonderful turnout. In Jesus' name, amen.
This time I'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
But we have Ann Peterson, President-elect. Treasurer Dave Pellier. Secretary Dave Nescoda. Past President Tom Kotzian. Directors Dave Botsberg, John Devine, Maggie Deschamps, Nat Diskin, Dana Fox, Cheryl Gates Pierce, James Gillen, Jeff Leach, Ray O'Neill, Marcy Sufrain, Stockton, and R.W. Watson. Now we're going to take a moment to hear from Tom Costin.
It's very short and brief, but to alert you to the fact that an agreement with the Department of Justice is about to expire this year in November 2018. This is a 10-year agreement that kind of borders on the antitrust area regarding virtual office websites, or as you know them, VOWs, V-O-W, which is different than an IDX, which is an internet data exchange, because IDX is simply advertising each other's listings on our websites. A virtual office website says that you are licensed by the state to conduct business. It's in cyberspace, and customers and clients take advantage of it, sign agreements, make offers, sign contracts, and the biggest advantage of a virtual office website is that it's much easier for parking. No, I made that part up. So what I'm going to do, rather than bore you with all the specifics, is simply say, when brokers communicate between other brokers and state how they're going to cooperate with other competitors, and that includes other third-party vendors that we don't want to name. And we put a list out, because you can opt in, opt out, selectively opt in. It's an actual MLS data feed into the VOW, which has every bit of information you would have on your own listings other than the confidential remarks. We can give the public data for solds for 3 years back. We can give them comp information off of a VOW. We can give them access to everyone else's listing the same way you have it in your office for the purpose of conducting business. The Department of Justice made sure that we are not letting brokers simply set up a phony office in cyberspace to pass information on. So the rule said 2 things. You must have a real estate broker's license, and number 2, you must actually conduct business. List property, offer cooperation and compensation, contract with your clients. You simply can't say, I set up a virtual office website, I'm collecting the data feed, and then I'm passing it on for a fee to someone else. But because of the issue of restraint of trade and talking with competitors about the practice, we are going to put out some communications. So between now and November, when they redo this Department of Justice agreement, you'll understand. See, in an IDX, it's all in or all out. It's a blanket offer. So either you are in IDX and you're getting everything so you can advertise it, or you're getting nothing. Well, with a VOW, you can select. You could say, I don't want my data to go to that broker, or your seller could say, I only want my address listed, I don't want my data going to this person. But doggone it, folks, the minute the MLS publishes a list of brokers who had made those selections, they now have a conspiracy. Because now everyone has each other's information of who's not cooperating with who. And that gets ugly, and even in federal court, if you prevail in an antitrust lawsuit, you have lost because of the legal expenses and the costs and the fact that your errors and omissions insurance company says, we don't insure that. And it's very expensive. So I've kind of given you a little bit of a tip as to what's coming up and the changes. But please, please watch the NOCBOR Impact newsletter as I write kind of how-to articles. So if you're going to practice in cyberspace and open a virtual office, that's fine. but you have to know what the rules are and make sure you don't discuss with anyone from another company what you're planning to do or how you're planning to do it or who you're working with. The only other issue I wanted to speak on today is a low inventory of listings. A lot of sellers who tell you they would really like to list, but if they can't find a home to move to, they're not going to do it. And they don't want to move to an apartment, only to move to another home. And so this crazy jam up we have of everybody waiting and watching is kind of disconcerting for our business. We need to unhitch those logs in that river and get them flowing so we have commerce again and business. If it's legal, you can write a contract on it. You can't write a contract on something that's illegal, immoral, or against public policy. And is there anything illegal about a seller having a contract to sell their home with a condition that they be able to find one within a certain period of time? Yes or no? Are there buyers willing to take the chance that I have that home under contract with a condition, the seller's looking for a home, and I'm willing to hold it simply because if they do, I have a nice home at a nice price. So there's nothing wrong in your listing presentations from saying what? You know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, there are some options, and that's actually what we're speaking of. It's kind of an option contract, whereby you could sell your home, get the price that your home deserves, and take that money and make it work for you in finding a new one with a condition that you find that home, put it under contract before you'll have to actually perform on yours in sale. Would you be interested in that? That's win-win for both parties, and if you are, let's take a look at how we can do that. So don't say to them, yeah, I know it's tough out there, and not be able to try to at least get that home on the market, because once inventory comes on, the purchasing starts, and the system works. But we're at a logjam, and interest rates are starting to creep up a little bit, so what you want to also let them know is every time that interest rate makes a move, you've just lost a little bit more buying power. A little bit bigger home now is becoming a little smaller because of the payment. So please, take some of the workshops, seminars, listing skills, because it's not just what you say, it's how you say it and the fact that you have the law on your side. And I will turn this back to the president, and I'm proud to say, Ms. Jennifer Rachel, your 2018 president of NOCBOR, her first meeting. Thank you very much.
Call to the podium Dave Niscoda, our chairman for Member Services Committee.
Thanks, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Great. Great round of applause for our staff here at Petrozella's. Great breakfast. Makes me feel important. So about shades, you know. Our future's so bright with NOCBOR, we've got to wear shades. So how's that? I'm trying to be a Tom Cotzian number 2. Only I'm better. Anyway, for the Member Services Committee, I just want to remind everybody that we do have a Pistons event coming up to Little Caesars. It's $55, includes a bus trip, $10 toward food or drink, a little bit of something there. and of course, we'll get a memorabilia from the Pistons itself. Also, on August the 2nd, we have another golf outing coming up, and that's going to be at the Fountains again this year. They do a great job for us. We've been at Pine Knob for a couple years. We're just going to shake it up a little bit. And with that, we've got other functions going, but these are all things that we try to do to encourage participation and networking amongst all our members. Thank you once again for being here today, and glad you fought the sunshine as you were driving here. Have a great day.
like to introduce Andy Meisner for a talk on Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017.
Let the gavel up here. Well, thank you, Madam President and members of the board, distinguished NOCBOR members, and assembled friends. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you this morning. And talking about taxes is kind of an occupational hazard for a treasurer. So this was a fortuitous assignment. I want to just start real quickly by acknowledging and thanking NOCBOR for your partnership in a public-private partnership that my office does with NOCBOR called Realtor to the Rescue. Has anyone heard of Realtor to the Rescue? I want to particularly thank Pat Jacobs and the team for their partnership, but I found myself having to sell abandoned tax foreclosed properties and as the county treasurer. We worked very hard to prevent foreclosures, but we were stuck with some of them. And I turned to my friends at NOCBOR and said, what if there was a profession of people that were really good at this already, at selling homes and connecting them with families? NOCBOR accepted the invitation. And we were recently won a couple of national awards for this program. There's Pat. We won an award in economic and community development. And we also won an award. It was the 100 top innovations in county government across the country from the National Association of Counties, one of the counterpart organizations to National Association of Realtors. And that very much is your success, and so I hope that you'll give yourself a round of applause for your great work with that. And by the way, June 14th is our tentative date for our Realtor training this year. If you'd like to participate in the Realtor to the Rescue program, and while no one's going to get rich doing this program, we did bump up the commission to the traditional 3%, so that our hardworking friends can be, compensated for your efforts. So thank you for that. So shifting gears, my assignment today is to talk a little bit about the federal changes in tax policy that happened recently. And I started my career working on Capitol Hill as a young aide to a couple members of Congress, and so this assignment kind of took me back some time. But it's called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 was enacted this last year. Now don't confuse that with the far less popular Jobs Cuts and More Taxes Act of 2017, which I think died in committee. Isn't that right, Chairman? So the plan, that is to significantly cut corporate taxes and individual taxes. That happened. It seeks to simplify the tax code. We all heard about our postcard tax return. I think mine might still be a little bit bigger than a postcard, but also seeing that reduction in the top corporate rate from 35 to 21%. And the plan has got its critics and supporters, but when a law becomes law, it's important that we all stand together and hope that it has the desired success, whether we loved it or hated it. And I think that there's a lot that the realtor community can love about this plan. There's a lot to be happy about. The National Association of Realtors that I referenced, your national organization, they were right in the thick of the battle on this thing during the sausage-making process, as they call the law-making process. And I think some of the wins for the industry came at the hands of those efforts and you working through your national organization as well as NOCBOR. And frankly, some of the wins were on defense. And if your organization and your the kind of the lobbying power that Rachel referenced, or President Rachel referenced, it can make a difference. Now, the realtor community did have some concerns because the federal law does make some pretty dramatic changes to the tax structure behind home ownership. And so that was something that was on the realtors' radars. And as the county treasurer, it is something that I'm monitoring closely. And there was, possibly some concern about disruption to the market. But we're going to pay careful attention to it. And I think that so far, the indications are that people, seem to like having a little bit more money in their pocket. And I do think that some of the concern might be resolved. Did anyone see the IRS clarification this last week? But there was some changes made to the ability to deduct interest on a HELOC, right? Like a home equity line of credit. And so just within the last few days, the IRS clarified that the interest on a HELOC can still be deducted as long as the proceeds of that HELOC are used for what they call quote-unquote acquisition indebtedness. You guys know what acquisition indebtedness is? As long as it's for that, then you can deduct it. And I gather that the IRS is going to construe that term broadly to include anything that you do to improve your home, as well as buy your home. And so, that's something that is, I think could make a bit of a difference for some of your clients and whatnot. Okay. All right, guys, so it's early in the morning, and I know that when I start talking about federal tax policy, you know it, guys, your eyes start to glaze over a little bit, right? You're like, well, this is education, this is something that I'm supposed to pay attention to, but I decided, you know what, I really love my friends at NOCBOR. I'm going to try to spice up federal tax law in a way that will make it a little bit more interesting for 9:20 in the morning. So what I decided to do for the remainder of the presentation is to share with you the changes in the federal tax law under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 through the lens of some of our favorite television shows. Okay? They didn't give me a PowerPoint to work with here, so we're going to start with Leave It to Beaver. Everyone remember Leave It to Beaver? You got some young people here, right? It's a little bit too old, but so the first question is, Leave It to Beaver, that's our first television show. How do the Cleavers make out under the changes in the federal tax law? You wonder about Wally and Aviv and Ward and June. Well, the realtors, not unlike the realtors, I should say, the Cleavers have some things to be very happy about under the new tax law. While there are some individual deductions that are lost, the standard deduction is double, right? And so maybe less itemized filers. The child tax credit for young Wally and Theodore is double from $1,000 to $2,000. And up to 1,400% of that is $1,400, I should say, is refundable. And that is as long with an income threshold of $400,000. So as long as Ward is not bringing home more than $400,000, they get the benefit of that child tax credit. And from the look of him, I didn't think he was making $400,000. I had them a little bit lower on the, this respectable, nice suburb, right? But it wasn't a caddy in the driveway. Now, there were some changes, of course, to the mortgage interest deduction and to the deduction for state and local taxes. And those are areas, that we really pay attention to. The Cleavers, I don't think, are going to be too troubled by those changes in the cap from $1 million down to $750,000. That didn't read as a $750,000 house to me, right? And I don't think they're paying more than $10,000 in state and local taxes. So I think the ruling is that the Cleavers make out pretty well under the new tax law. Not bad, Cleavers. Just keep an eye out for that Eddie Haskell. Right? You remember that Eddie Haskell? Okay. Okay. So next television show, The Beverly Hillbillies. You guys remember The Beverly Hillbillies? Family strikes gold, black gold, and they go out to Beverly Hills. The Clampetts, you might not have guessed it, but they were actually in a higher tax bracket than the Cleavers, right? It's Beverly Hills. So both families are going to benefit from the reductions in the individual rate of taxation. The highest rate dropped from 39.6% to 37%. And that's the highest bracket for families north of $600,000. With that oil, I peg the Clampetts as being there. So that's a little change for the benefit of Granny and the gang. And then also, there were some adjustments made to the alternative minimum tax and the estate tax. And so those thresholds were increased. And that's something else that I think is going to help not only the Clampetts, but frankly, we are in Oakland County. It's one of the wealthiest counties in the country. And so, we have people in the Clampett demographic who I think are going to be happy about some of the changes. Now, dropping the cap on the mortgage interest deduction could affect a family like the Clampetts, right? Because it was $1 million more mortgage interest deduction, now down to $750,000. And listen, it's possible that their property tax might have been more than $10,000, right? In which case they're losing a little bit of the firepower of that tax deduction. Just kind of parenthetically, that's one of the reasons why when this bill was enacted, I reached out to all of the local treasurers and local governments across Oakland County and urged them to accept early payment of 2018 property taxes. And the premise being, use your 2017 assessed level as a guide, prepay it if you're in a cash position to be able to do that, claim the exemption on your 17, and get a little bit of added benefit. There were communities like Bloomfield Township that actually saw huge spikes in payments after that. And Brian Keeps is a real sharp guy who's the local treasurer there. Okay, next show. Real estate. Anyone seen $1 Million Listing? You guys ever seen this? We got some fans of that show? No? Some folks like this show. Okay, so it's this is like $1 Million Listing in New York, right? And it's these very, very coiffed gentlemen who are realtors who are doing these deals on very expensive real estate, right? They're $20 million homes. And so how do the high-end realtors, Josh Altman, Josh Flagg, Frederick Eklund, and Madison Hildebrand, those names mean anything to you? Okay, so how do those boys make up? Well, as pass-through organizations, the boys are going to be happy with their tax treatment under the new law. Independent contractors and pass-through business owners with personal service income, which I think includes a lot of folks here, may generally claim the full 20% deduction under the personal service income exemption, with a taxable income below the $157,000 threshold for individuals and $315,000 joint. Now, if that's a little bit low, and you're looking at the higher levels of the income deduction, this is a little bit confusing sounding, but see if you can follow me. It becomes the lesser of either 20% of taxpayers' qualified business income or 50% of the business's W-2 wages, or a combo of 25% of W-2 wages and 2.5% of the value of any capital acquisitions for that year. So that's a mind scrambler for you to figure out. Get back more on that. Okay, so last show, Had to go with The Apprentice, of course. And, you know, in light of our president and the lead advocate for the bill, could go Apprentice, could go House of Cards, you know, depending if you're, you know, where you're coming from, but whatever, it doesn't matter. How does a real estate developer make out under this? You know, that obviously is, you know, has been the president's field. Well, you know, developers have some things to be happy about under this law on the commercial side. They're happy that you know, keeping the Section 1031 exchange. You guys are familiar with this transaction? That's a good example, I think, of the National Association and your locals and NOCBOR engaging in the federal process and getting a win through defense. They wanted to go after that, but it was preserved. And so that's going to be helpful. There were similar wins from an industry perspective on carried interest and depreciation, things affecting our friends in the community. And so now Oakland County native Nicole Curtis, who is the rehab addict, you guys know this show? You know, she's from Lake Orion, so she's a native-born girl and has really done great things. You know, her thing has been to renovate historic properties, right? So is she happy or sad? Well, there were some changes to the rehabilitation for the historic tax credit at the federal level, and there was a bit of a reduction in the benefit, but it's not eliminated under the new law, and so we'll be seeing a lot more of those beautifully renovated homes, and we'll be seeing that from her and others. So we've seen the new changes in the federal tax law from the television's perspective through that lens. What does your county treasurer think? I'm hopeful that it's going to have the advertised effects. I think that, you know, people seem to be warming up to it. You know, the lawmaking process is always ugly. It's always an ugly process, right? That's why they call it sausage making. Listen, I heard just on the radio this morning, I was telling Pat Jacobs, public opinion seems to be swinging in favor of this thing. And so I think anytime there's a law change, we got to give it a chance, and we got to hope that it can work. And there's some indications that it's going to help juice growth for us. And so I'm mindful of that, and I'm paying careful attention to the impact on the real estate market as the county treasurer. And so I hope that I can continue to count on Frontline's intel from my friends in the realtor community about what you're seeing. But it's all looking pretty good from my perspective. I would be remiss. It is Oakland County. We are AAA bond rated, and we have a balanced budget. And so I would say, I don't want to call it a critique so much as to say that one concern I've got is just about the impact on the debt. And so it's going to be $1.5 trillion. But if God willing, the thing has the effect that it's advertised to have, then we can grow the economy and hopefully pay down some of that debt or find other offsets through cuts to make sure that we're paying for it. And that concludes my remarks. I appreciate the chance to be with you, and look forward to hearing from our distinguished chairman, Jim Tedder. You're going to come back up. Okay, thank you. And I think we'll take questions. Pat?
Andy, could you just briefly tell them about your two bills that were introduced and passed and signed by the governor?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, is Jim good over there with that?
You're the authority on it.
Are you sure?
Yeah, please.
I was going to Jim do that just because it's a state policy matter, but as long as you ask Pat, and Jim can expound on it, but.
Well, it was someone in our trenches that got dirty.
We discovered at our office a bit of a underhanded strategy on the part of a gentleman from Macomb County who was targeting probate families. And what the guy would do is he would cross-reference the death records with the delinquent tax records and look for properties that had significant assets, and then would make a play on the property in two ways. One, by paying a bit of the property taxes to get a lien that he would file against the property. And then next, he would go to his buddy, who was a public administrator appointed by the Attorney General, and say, hey, I got a really good house that you should start a probate estate on. And they didn't really care if there were heirs, legitimate heirs around. They would just file the probate, and then they bled the estate down to the bone, such that if they eventually did find any heirs, there was a pittance for them. We testified with a woman from Waterford. You know, it was a $50,000 or $60,000 home. Her and her brother ended up getting like $1,000 a piece. And so, with the help of tremendous representatives like Jim Tedder, who was so responsive to the request for help, we got a bill through the legislature in about 5 or 6 months that is essentially shutting down these operations. It's requiring that families have more time to open up a probate estate. You now have 63 days. And at that time, Mary and I talked a little bit about her situation. That time goes quickly. You know, you just lost mom or dad. You're not thinking about having to file a probate. So we bought you more time to do that. Stronger notice requirements, so that these yo-yos have got to notice you. They've got to serve you and give you a chance to claim what is rightfully yours. We also created a criminal misdemeanor associated with it to send the message that this is not a place that you want to be. There may be, somebody who's in a probate situation, requires help from people, but it's got to be help, like getting a realtor's help, for instance. These guys were juicing their fees, and it was just triple dipping, getting paid for the real estate commission, real estate maintenance, and all these other sorts of fees or whatever. And so it's something that we got to pay attention to, and hopefully the new law is going to help us do that a bit. Thanks for the question. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes?
Do you know the 2-year run on this? What's going to happen? I heard that in 2 years things will change the bill.
Not with our bill. The question was, are there any changes that are included in the bill in 2 years? The changes that were made were effective upon enactment, and there aren't any out-year changes that are included in that. There was some discussion about not only looking at the probate estates, but looking at some of the other things that these public administrators do. Like they do the guardian ad litums. And Ms. Heather Catalo on Channel 7 has documented some egregious cases of someone they have a guardian appointed, they drug them up. There was this poor woman who was drugged up, and basically they strung her out on opioids and put her in an unlicensed home. And so I'm hoping that they'll take a look at that section of the law as well. I think that opens up a different one. But anybody else? Yes, sir.
The Realtor to the Rescue, I saw that and I thought that was a great program at the
Thank you.
last tax round last year. How do we sign up? You said that June 14th, but how do we apply to that?
Oh, just see Pat. If you just see Pat, she's got the application, and and we do ask that you come to the Realtor to the Rescue training. We do it over at the commission. It was June 14th. And we were talking a little bit at the table. There are some weird things about tax foreclosed properties that you don't deal with REO and just normal market stuff that you deal with. Like the deed that they get is something that is a little bit iffy. And so, you probably have to do a quiet title action. And so it just gives us a chance to help you allow your clients to come into the situation with eyes wide open and make sure that there's no surprises. And so just come to the training. We'll videotape it as well. And then you just basically sign somebody up, take them through one of the Realtor to the Rescue properties, which will be lockboxed, maybe electronically locks box if I see the future as it seems to be forming. And then if you if your client is the high bidder at the auction, then you get a commission. And by the way, we have a mortgage program where we will allow any of your clients, if they get pre-approved for a mortgage up to whatever amount it is, we will, and they provide us documentation of that pre-approval, we'll let them bid at the auction up to that amount. So if you don't have a cash buyer, but you've got somebody who could maybe get a mortgage, and then what we do is we leave the sale open for only about 3 or 4 weeks. So I mean, it really requires us lining everything up just perfectly. But you can bring, non-cash buyers to the table on it, and they're going to need a little bit of money for renovation, and all these things need a roof and HVAC and that whole deal. But any other questions? Yeah, I'm really hard selling them, I know. I guess, ma'am.
There's a recent case that a Wells Fargo owned the property effective the date of the sheriff being therefore responsible for condominium association, which is like new law. So in the Realtors to the Rescue program, does the bidder take title immediately?
Yeah, and there's a little bit of a distinction between a mortgage foreclosure and a tax foreclosure. So, mortgage foreclosure, you get in trouble with the mortgage company, they send you a nasty letter, they set a sheriff's auction, which the sheriff's civil division does out of the court, and then they have an auction. After that auction, the individual, in most cases, gets 6 months as a statutory redemption period. And then, during which time they can bring forth everything that's owed, plus all the fees and everything that's been added, and they can, redeem their property. In a tax foreclosure case, you don't pay property taxes, local government sends it over to our office, and there's a 28-month process whereby you have to pay the taxes or work out a payment plan with us, or let us help you get connected with the Step Forward Loan Rescue Program that can pay for delinquent taxes up to $30,000. And then, the end of March of the third year is the drop dead deadline, and there's no redemption, after that point. And so it's one of the ways that it's a little bit, it's got some kind of curves to it. And you don't want to have anybody surprised in a bad way. Anybody else? Yes?
Are there, I know that the county sells a lot of vacant property also on the tax auctions. Is there the ability of buyers to be able to be pre-qualified with the loan you were discussing in order to get a vacant land loan?
I would talk to you about it. It's not something that we've contemplated, but I'd be interested to hear about the use, and what you're thinking about. I mean, like for a garden or to build or?
No, just to be able to own the vacant land, to eventually build on or use it to park a picnic table on.
Yeah, so to kind of enhance a neighboring property?
To enhance neighboring property, or just to be able to obtain it. A lot of people, like you said, don't have the cash. We actually do really like that, and we have a side lot program where anytime that we have any tax foreclosure, we reach out to the neighbors, and we do find them to be ideal folks to buy these properties. A lot of times they're taking care of it anyway. Well, I'm talking just an individual, say I found a piece of property and I didn't want to pay cash for it. And, to have, there's, been in the past some acreage parcels.
See, it would depend how much Jacobs twist my arm on it.
Well,
generally, my overall goal with the program is to try to promote home ownership and as a principal residence. That's really my goal. We can be, flexible, but that's kind of what we're shooting for. So I'd love for you to do it and then build a home on it and something like that. Maybe one more. Yes, sir.
At the auction, you had mentioned pre-approved mortgage people versus cash buyers.
Yeah.
Do they compete at the same time?
Yes.
They don't have a little leeway for the mortgage people.
No. They're in the same kind of field of battle. And my hope is that having that pre-approval letter and that expanded capacity to bid is going to allow them to compete. But yeah, it does get a little bit aggressive. It is Oakland County after all, and Oakland County's got a great brand, and so I find that the better stuff seems to go for about maybe 3/4 of market value, and I wouldn't want somebody overbidding. We have not figured out a way that we can give the mortgage folks a head start without impinging the rights of the other participants.
Well, I just wanted to ask you about that. So let's say that a person, and it's a great idea because it makes it available to a lot more people that want to buy a home. So I mean, I applaud you for that great idea. But
Team effort.
let's say that they can't close for some reason. Something happens. They're pre-approved. And they made a mistake, they went and bought a new car, so now their debt to income's changed, something like that. So then what happens when that falls through? You said they have 4 weeks. Does it go to the second round auction, or does the next highest bidder get it? How do you address that issue?
Yeah, we try to pay attention to the bidders and the sequence of bidders. And so we would probably try to get a deal done with the next highest bidder.
Okay, so you have
I feel like we'll take a little window to try to put that through, and then if we can't make it happen, then we will send it over to the next sale. By the way, to your point, he's totally right about getting more people through these properties, and those footsteps coming through have increased the average sales price of the Realtor to the Rescue program properties over the others by about $30,000. So awesome impact. Well, thank you guys, and listen, 421-ANDY is my cell phone, 248-421-ANDY, and I got a bunch of cards, and so if you have Realtor to the Rescue questions or anything else, always feel free to give me a call, and be excited to hear from our friend Representative Tedder. Thank you.
That's for you, Dave. That's for you so bright you gotta wear shades. 2 3. Figured I've got to step up my game here between Dave and our esteemed treasurer. I wasn't expecting to put on my thespian hat and some props, but game on, fellas, game on, okay? Because there's no question that tax policy can be very dry and boring. But what I hope to share with you today is ultra super exciting. And first, want to say that while I never. Speaking of TV shows, I never played a real estate agent on TV, but I did play one in real life. That's a true fact, and those on the Government Relations Committee know that. And so as tax policy chair, as a member of the House of Representatives, it's one of the many lenses I look through. And real estate realtors, not only here in NOCBOR, but across the state, have become very dear friends and very trusted allies and experts in all the difficult decisions that we have to make. And so while Treasurer Meisner was talking about a lot of the federal tax changes, it was suggested I share what's going on at the state level. And to borrow on some of the TV themes, let's start with Gilligan's Island. And and this is morning at the Improv, by the way. But I've learned something today. I'm a new study of this gentleman right here. And so our primary goal within not only tax policy but the House of Representatives is not to leave all the good people of Michigan on Gilligan's Island, potentially with a $1.5 billion tax increase vis-a-vis the federal legislation. So it was a no-brainer, a bipartisan effort to put forth legislation. While there were a myriad of offerings, what we ended up passing was Senate Bill 748. That was sponsored by Jack Brandenburg, my counterpart who chairs the Senate Finance Committee. And so not only do we really change the language and change the references to the federal tax code, which creates that certainty required to affirm that Michiganders keep their exemption, their personal exemption for head of household, dependent spouse, and minor dependents. But we've gone even a little further. So for tax year 2018, where we stand today, you're looking at a $4,050 personal exemption, so a nominal increase. But over time, fiscal 19, $4,400, fiscal 20, $4,750, and by 2021, $4,900. So again, the Fonz might say, happy days. Hey. Right? A little more money in our pocket, whether it's federal money or whether it's state money. And ironically, I heard one of the things I never thought I would say here as a state lawmaker, that we need to be more like the federal government. When have you ever heard that? Well, we heard it because it frankly seems that it required the federal tax initiative to foster a little more courage at the state level to bring forth some nominal relief that Michigan taxpayers haven't seen, frankly, for a long time. While it's not a ton of money, it's still symbolic in that we're giving more money to people who in large part have seen stagnant, if any, growth in their wages over time. So we're looking at, some have estimated anywhere from $105 to $150 for a family of 4 once fully implemented. So that is, and that is also indexed for inflation over time as well. So we'll see continued growth, at least commensurate with inflation as we move forward. So that's Senate Bill 748, and that was sent off to presented to the governor on the 20th of February. And we've been really busy in tax policy. It's, for me, an ultra exciting place to be, and I hope to grow old as the chair of tax policy at one level or another. It's been absolutely fascinating and something that I've uniquely embraced. And we've done some really important work that I think that you'll also appreciate as realtors and business people. The next piece of legislation I'm going to share with you is House Bill 4643, and that was introduced by my co-chair, Representative Dave Maturin. And he is an appraiser by trade, so he knows a great deal about the business. But simply put, House Bill 4643 amends the State Real Estate Transfer Tax Act and alters the eligibility of requirement for one of the exemptions. And so what was happening is there was an uneven playing field depending upon whether or not you built your home or you purchased an existing home. And so it's pretty cut and dry. You buy an existing home in 2015, you sell it in 2018, and the value is, hypothetically say, it's declined. And so since that value is less than the value of the date of purchase, well, you don't have to pay that transfer tax. Well, when you're buying a vacant piece of land, of course that vacant piece of land is going to cost a lot less than any house you put on that lot. And so what the most significant change is here really is with respect to deleting the reference to the SEV on the date of purchase. And under the bill, in order to meet the exemption criteria, the current SEV of the property would have to be less than or equal to the SEV on the first tax day after the issuance of a certificate of occupancy and for that residence, or, as currently stated, the date of acquisition of the property by the seller. So it takes into account, it levels the playing field, so whether or not you're building a new home or you're purchasing an existing one, that if your aggregate value, your value decreases relative to that C of O or the purchase date, that you would be exempt from paying those transfer taxes. One I'm really excited about, as we all remember our first home buying experience. I wasn't a real estate agent at the time, but so it was even more of a magical experience for me. 21 or 22 years ago, purchasing my first home, and how hard I had worked to put money aside. I actually ended up just piling a bunch of money into my 401k because it was the quickest way I could put money pre-tax. And then I pulled it out to buy my first home and paid myself back over time. Well, I'm really excited to support some legislation that would create the first-time home buyer savings program. And so in essence, a grandparent, a parent, a high school student working a part-time job, or anyone in between would be eligible to put up to $5,000 a year away pre-tax into a first-time home buyer savings account. And for joint for joint filers, you could put as much as $10,000 away, up to $50,000. That money could likewise grow tax-free, and as long as those proceeds were used for the purchase of a home here in Michigan, that money would remain tax-free. So it's something that was referred to my committee not long ago. Really excited to be taking that up and holding a hearing here real soon. Senator McGregor is the main sponsor of the main bill, Senate Bill 512, which allows the creation of this act and allows for those annual contributions, 5 and 10 commensurately, and you can pay into that fund for up to 20 years. So a pretty significant way to entice and expand home ownership and to promote savings for people. And so I couldn't be more excited to take that on. We look forward to hearing more about that.
Is there an income limit for the savings account?
Not. Let me dive in here a little deeper. I don't believe that there is. I will verify that though for you. And if it is, the threshold is fairly high. Yeah.
What are the tax consequences if you withdraw those and you don't?
There's a 10% penalty.
In addition to an income tax?
We've let's see here, specified the account subject to a penalty equal to 10% of the amount withdrawn. So that that's the penalty here at the state level as far as
There'd also be income tax.
Federal implications. Sure. Yeah.
What's your definition of a first-time home buyer? Is it going to be somebody who's not owned a home for the last few years?
Good question. Yes, as the bill is currently stands, it would be a first-time home buyer by maybe the purest definition, or somebody that has not owned a homestead in the better part of 3 years, and that could be because of foreclosure, it could be because of life-altering circumstances such as a divorce that wrecks one's credit. There's a myriad of different reasons why, so that is part of the bill. Credit recovery program, there's a myriad of reasons why one might have fallen out of home ownership, and so if it's been more than 3 years, then they would be eligible to start putting money away and saving toward that down payment.
Shannon, who'd you say was the originator of that bill?
Pete McGregor is the sponsor of Senate Bill 511.
Thank you.
Yep, and there's also 512, which kind of puts the infrastructure in place and is really like the companion bill to that. Sure.
Did you say maximum 50,000 for a single person or married couple?
Maximum 50,000, as I understand it, 50,000 max for the account. Now that account can grow to $100,000 over time just through accrual of interest, and that interest remains tax-free as well.
So it could be either way, single or married couple.
Correct. Yes. But if you're
You also set up 2 accounts at that point individually, and one for the 100,000.
Yeah, and I don't know technically what that looks like and if that's achievable, but that's possible. It's possible. And, I think this is and also a nod to people that make $1 too much to receive any sort of real tax benefits or subsidies, and for people that make too little to be isolated from the cost of home ownership altogether. So it's really, I think, an important tool for middle-class families, and in the spirit of encouraging savings, and of course working toward that ultimate dream of home ownership. There were a couple other things I wanted to share with you. I wrote them on here, I believe, somewhere.
Hey, Jim?
Yeah.
This homeowner's savings account, where is it held and what is the interest rate? Is it something statewide?
Well, that would be subject to, I think, like you would open up a savings account with any other financial institution. Again, I haven't delved into the weeds yet on it. I've had some meetings with your state counterparts, Michigan Association of Realtors, and looking forward to the testimony to do a little deeper dive into this. So right now, I'm more or less I'm at a surface level understanding. We'll vet out additional details and what those things look like.
Jim? Jim?
Yes.
Is there an age restriction on how young you can be or need to be to open the account?
Not that I'm aware of.
Is it taxpayer age, non-taxpayer age?
Yeah. Let's see, based on the information I have. Yeah, I'm not certain of the, but I do know that there's, been discussion that someone even high school age, which could mean 18, of course, but they're likely independent at some level would be eligible. What I'd be happy to do as well, again, I'm looking forward to holding a hearing on this over the next couple of weeks, and I'd be happy to, present a summary to Pat to give you a little more clarity and understanding, and I'm sure the state association will do the same too. But I'll present it to you through my eyes, and she can disseminate that to the membership if that sounds reasonable to you.
And ladies and gentlemen, on the table is a white piece of paper, has a lot of print on it. Looks something like this. Cheryl, let me look this. This piece of paper right here, it's two-sided. It talks about the probate bills that Andy brought to our attention and the first-time home buying savings account. So you might want to just take a look at that. And then, Jim, you'll get me a synopsis and I'll get it out to the group. How's that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I'll do that after we have our hearing. If there are any amendments or substitutes that come about, we'll do it after that point. Just a couple other things. Those of you that are small business owners, own brokerage firms, or mortgage companies, what have you, this may be of interest or benefit to you as well. A bill that I sponsored ran through House tax policy, and it's gone through the House over to the Senate. Is we call a small taxpayer exemption bill. And under current law, if you have, and it's with respect to personal property. So if you have less than $80,000 in personal property, you can fill an exemption form every year that allows you to exempt yourself from paying personal property tax. Well, there's a couple issues. Number one is that for small businesses especially, an exorbitant burden to do that year after year after year after year when your status hasn't changed at any level. And also the truth remains is that there are a great many small businesses that either don't know or don't want to go through the hassle of filling out this form, and therefore forego the opportunity to exempt themselves from personal property tax. So what my bill accomplishes is that it allows for a one-time filing, so that, again, if you're under $80,000 of personal property, it's a one-time filing, and that's the only, unless your circumstances change, you wouldn't need to change that paperwork. There are still local auditing processes that may be in place, through cities, villages, and townships to assess that your status hasn't changed, but the burden falls off of you. And so that's, I think, a real important opportunity, another nod to making this state friendlier towards small business.
What's that bill number?
Actually, let me get the bill number. I'm sorry, I didn't write that one down. But, let's see. Got that. Yeah, I'll get you the bill number. All right. And that is over, sitting over in the Senate. And I just wanted one final thing here, as I know you've been here a while, is underscore the great working relationship we've had with the county, and it was probably, gosh, at least 2 years ago, Treasurer Meisner asked me to come in his office and talk about this probate process of use. And so hats off to the treasurer in bringing that to our attention. And it wasn't long after that we had a conference call with state lawmakers and the treasurer and his team, and were able to successfully work together to achieve some real meaningful work there. And I think quietly, probably one of the most significant pieces of legislation that we will have passed over the last few years. So hats off to the treasurer and county.
And the meeting is adjourned.